can you talk about your own journey into this field of eco spirituality? That is a field that maybe some people have not heard of before.
Good. Yes, happy to do so. Eco-spirituality really is an experience of God and faith and prayer in relationship to nature and how one lives one's life. And so for me, this really began as a result of some completely unexpected events in my life. When I was 18, I was going to school at University of California, Davis, and I met this very inspirational um, ecumenical faith community of young adults who were living very strong biblical Christian ideals. You could also call it a Jesus freak hippie commune. And so I dropped out of school. I was so inspired by them. It wasn't because wasn't doing well academically, but it just seemed like how they were living and what they were doing in their life project was so much more compelling than going to school. And so we moved to rural Oregon. We sponsored migrants and refugees. We had a Christian rock and roll band. We showed the film Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. This was the late 70s, so even though that movie seems a little like a period piece now, it was very inspirational to me at the time, and it's definitely worth watching. But we had a reforestation co-op, and that's how we made our money. And so for me, this was this dramatic immersion into the forests of Oregon, Washington, Northern California, um, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. And so wherever they would go through and cut down trees and log them and create these clear cuts, which really are ugly and they're highly problematic from an ecological perspective, we would go in and plant little baby trees. And so these trees would be like 18 inches tall, maybe. And we would plant 500, 1,000, 1,500, even 2,000 a day. And so this was a very heavy work, but it was also done under the open sky. And in Oregon, that meant pouring rain most of the time. So we would work out in the elements, and it was brutally hard work. But I discovered a beauty about creation there that I had as a result of really being surrounded by creation, even creation that had been suffering from human abuse. There was still this majesty about these ancient forests. And the fact that we would participate in some small way in trying to bring back life in these places that had been devastated for economic exploitation reasons. And so this really was an experience of being largely in silence in nature for most of the year for 5 years, and left a profound impact on me. It taught me things about the material nature of life and the interdependence of life and the relationship between prayer and beauty and healing and God's awesome creative power. And so I began to ask questions. Why did no one seem to be paying attention to our environmental problems when it seemed like this was like a natural kind of visceral experience? And I wasn't the only one. Maybe it wasn't something people would talk about in church. It wasn't back in the 80s, but it was certainly something that was consistent with St. Francis's experience. And I thought, wow, how awesome is this? What? Here's an example. And so this was left a profound kind of imprint on my spiritual awareness, and thinking of this also in terms of an obligation to act out of love and gratitude. And even though I, at the time wasn't really fully clear on the limitations of a lot of environmental discourse led by NGOs and advocacy organizations, I still felt like this is something that's morally and religiously compelling. So when the first that community fell apart, I looked around and I said, well, I think I want to pursue this in a more intentional sort of way. So that's when I discerned the call to become a Franciscan friar. So I did that, actually. I began the process. I wasn't Catholic, so I went through an RCIA process and then joined the Franciscans back here in the West Coast. And so I've been a friar ever since. And my vocation director, who was a very strong influence in my life, he also had a lot of environmental background, horticulturalist, did graduate studies in theology, wrote his master's thesis in theology on liberation theology and the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. So he said, well, it's really great that you're interested in this integration, but I need to tell you before you sign up, like there's not a lot of established pathways in Franciscan religious life for it. There's sort of like a dawning awareness that we need to be doing some of this, but we don't know how. So in Spanish, there's a nice little saying, El camino se hace por caminar. The road is made by walking. And so that's been a part of my life, is trying to show people, including my own Franciscan brothers, that it's possible and that God desires that there be an integration between our spiritual life and our spiritual practices and our relationship with God and our understanding of ourself and responsible ecological awareness and action.